and help you pick the right stock at the right time.
Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, India's first digital live streaming business news service. I am Agam Vakil. Here are the headlines. Markets in Japan and Australia are trading little change in early trade. Other markets across Asia Pacific region are shut on account of the Lunar New Year. The central government asked the Reserve Bank of India to transfer its entire surplus generated over the last 2 years as it seeks to meet its revised budget goals for the ongoing and the next financial years. Hours after deciding to charge a 0.25% corporate brand royalty from its subsidiaries, Jubilant Enpro has decided to withdraw the proposal. Hindustan Petroleum reported a surprise net profit for the third quarter. Analysts' estimates had projected the company to report a net loss of 1 crore. Higher inventory losses impacted the company's GRMs. And the three nifty companies, Adani Ports, JSW Steel Earnings, will be reporting the third quarter earnings today. Now let's begin with the action on Wall Street. Stocks ended higher on Tuesday after better than expected results from certain companies. The S&P 500 ended higher for the fifth day in a row. Abigail Doolittle of Bloomberg News sums up Tuesday's trading session in this report.
Stocks climbed in Tuesday's Wall Street session. A bit of a risk-on tone for the major averages. The Dow, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, all up 0.5% or more. The S&P 500 and that tech-heavy Nasdaq up closer to 0.7%. And for the S&P 500, its fifth up day in a row, the longest winning streak in almost a month. So we've had this risk rally for stocks. Interestingly, though, not so much for the commodity space, at least on the day. The commodity space down about 0.3%, that Bloomberg Commodity Index. Oil down closer to 0.9%, down for a second day in a row. So the lack of confirmation between those two risk assets, something to think about. Investors, traders not taking on risk in all asset classes. As for the sector composition, interestingly, even with oil lower for a second day in a row, energy was actually higher. One of the 8 up sectors out of the S&P 500's 11 sectors. On top, though, consumer discretionary, consumer services, and technology. As for some of the movers helping out the S&P 500 on the day, in that retail sector, Estee Lauder up about 11%. And then we also had Ralph Lauren up 8.4%. So some of those retail luxury names trading higher on the day on strong quarters, plus driven by some strength out of China. Now, from the technology space, Apple up for a fifth day in a row, the best winning streak since October of last year. Almost the most valuable company in the world. At the close, though, that was Microsoft, as Microsoft and Amazon also climbed on the day. Those three companies, along with Alphabet, vying for that spot. And then finally, earlier we were talking about the fact that oil was lower. Bonds, Haven bonds, rallied on the day. That confirms the weakness in oil. So there were some risk-off nuances, despite the fact that stocks were higher in the day. Something to keep in mind as trading continues this week. From New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
Let's take stock of what we can expect in going into today's day of trade when it comes to the Indian markets, starting off the SGX Nifty. Well, it's currently trending in the green by as much as 44 odd points, so 0.5% gains coming in for the SGX Nifty. How was our trading day yesterday? Well, mixed once again. While the NDCs tried to move up, what we really saw was considerable weakness in the broader market. So your mid-cap and your small-cap indices actually declining for yet another day, where we did have an adverse advanced decline ratio as well. Again, mixed cues for the banking indices, but how is it that the American depository receipts are currently trending? We take a look at Tata Motors, which declined by around 2.5%. Save for that, less than 1% losses for ICICI Bank, Wipro, and Infosys. In terms of gainers, we do have HDFC Bank, Dr. Reddy's, and Vedanta also advancing by less than 1%. Foreign institutional flows saw about 420 odd crores worth of inflow as far as equity is concerned on a net basis. DIIs as well buying into the equity markets. But in terms of contributors, it was essentially HDFC Bank, IndusInd Bank and Titan Company, of course, advancing further. On the losing end, we had ITC, ICICI Bank and ONG bearing down on the indices and putting on some pressure. But when it comes to futures and options, what we're keeping an eye on is further increase in open interest, despite the fact that the Nifty hasn't really moved too much for the Nifty futures, seeing OI increase of around 4.5%, and it's the same for the Bank Nifty futures too. That has seen a rise of 4% in open interest. It's still a 300-point range between 10,700 and 11,000 based on maximum open interest in their respective puts and calls. What we saw yesterday was a little more writing around the 10,900 put and unwinding in the 11,200 put as well. So watch out for those levels. In the India Volatility Index remains largely unchanged, still at the mark of 15.8. And in terms of the Nifty put call ratio, what we're keeping an eye on is ever so slight edging up towards 1.68. The same for the Bank Nifty put call ratio, which remains unchanged at around 1.04. And in terms of stocks, well, there's some interesting moves coming in. So while we do have IDBI Bank and Diwan Housing Finance already in the F&O ban, we have new true entrants here. Jet Airways and Reliance Capital join the group of those stocks which are in the F&O ban. Now, we're keeping an eye on something like a Tata Global Beverages, which declined by 7% yesterday, on fresh shorts on poor earnings, Cipla and ACC. Of course, Cipla's, we're seeing some build-up ahead of earnings, even though it didn't really move too much. But on the other hand, we have Berger Paints and Exide as well, which are seeing some sort of unwinding. But the pressure on the ADHG group stocks continues to, well, bear down, at least as far as the mid-cap indices go. But on that note, let's go across to, well, Rami Inocencio or Bloomberg News to see what's making the headlines. Here he gives us the first word, heads.
I'm Rami Inocencio with the first word headlines. The U.S. is considering its potential reaction if an allied nation ignores warnings about working with Huawei. The State Department says that due to the close connections between the U.S. and its allies, especially in NATO, a military emergency could force communications over a Huawei system. The Trump administration accuses Huawei of espionage and has warned allies to drop the company. A record number of candidates have registered as Thailand looks forward to its first general election since the coup back in 2014. Almost 6,500 people from 60 political parties have recorded details with the Election Commission. That's more than 3 times the number at the 2011 election. The vote has been postponed frequently, though, over the past few years, but it is now set for March 24th. Snapchat's parent soared in late trade after figuring out how to squeeze more revenue from a stagnant user base. Fourth quarter sales came in a fraction below $390 million, topping estimates of $377 million. Snap failed to add any new users since the preceding period, but the steady numbers are a victory, considering that analysts forecast the amount of people using Snapchat daily would actually shrink. Top miner Vale is declaring force majeure in contracts for iron ore and pellets. That's following the suspension of work at its operation in Brazil's Minas Gerais state. Work at the mine was halted when a judge questioned the condition of a tailings dam. Vale says there is no technical or risk assessment for that ruling and is taking appropriate measures in response. It hasn't said how contracts may be affected.
The government has asked RBI to transfer the surplus it has withheld in financial years 2016-17 and 2017-18, Junior Finance Minister informed the Parliament. The government has requested RBI to transfer an interim dividend in financial year 2018-19, keeping under consideration the surplus which was withheld by the RBI in FY17 and FY18. Remember, the RBI had transferred 131 billion rupees in its contingency fund in FY17 and about 142 billion rupees in FY18. Now the government is asking the RBI to transfer this amount to the government in 2 tranches, Bloomberg News reported. The government in its budget estimates has considered this 13,000 crore rupees it is going to get from the RBI in current financial year, taking the total RBI surplus that it's going to receive to 68,000 crore rupees. And for the next financial year, the government expects 69,000 rupees to come from the RBI as surplus, which includes 142 billion rupees that the RBI transferred to its contingency fund in FY18. This comes after the RBI agreed to constitute a committee to look into the surplus that the RBI should hold on to its books, and the committee is yet to submit its report. And even then, the government has decided to ask RBI to transfer the surplus it hold on to its books to transfer to the central government. Over to you.
So currency has had no impact because the average rupee rate has been roughly the same Q2 and Q3.
Sure.
So reality is, if I really look at it, two things. One is automation and some of the optimization in terms of utilization. That's been the margin lever for almost the entire margin. And that's something which, if you really step back, I think there are 4 key levers we talked about. One is portfolio companies. Second is automation and how we invest in creating our own platform and using that. Third is, of course, utilization and how we look at workforce and how we look at talent. And the fourth is in terms of managing the pyramid and also managing the revenue mix. And if I look at that, and it's been a consistent 7-quarter journey of managing that. And clearly, we have done well on certain parameters, and there are something else which are potential future levers. For example, portfolio, we can do some more. Some of the automation initiatives, we can do some more. So those will be future levers for us.
Okay. Mr. Gurnani, in the past 1 or 2 quarters, you've also made some acquisitions such as Inter Informatics and Dynacommerce. That's the very recent one. How does this play out? Are these acquisitions because of the requirements of the company, or is this something that is going to drive growth? My question really is to do with, is it to do with catering to clients at this point in time, or will that, of course, eventually attract clients too?
So, in the last few months, we announced 3 acquisitions. One is an acquisition in Czechoslovakia, where we said we are acquiring a specialized firm which is into engineering, particularly the aircraft cabin engineering. It's clearly skill augmentation. It is clearly a skill that we didn't have in the country. We didn't have it in Tech Mahindra, and we needed it. But this is specialized. It is aircraft cabin engineering. The second acquisition that you saw was in video services integration for a company which was both US and India based. There, I think the requirement is fairly wide, particularly in the media and entertainment industry. So hopefully, while we have acquired a strategic partnership and a leader, who is the promoter is now our leader for that video and services integration, I think it is a great help that we have this team and they are able to represent Tech Mahindra. The third one that you saw very recently in Netherlands, I mean, reality is could be a game changer for us, because for a product and a product as a service, particularly which is focused on customer experience management, I think is a great opportunity. Though it's a very, very small acquisition, but I think our capability to upsell is infinite, and our capability to again be able to develop and drive synergy, I think is reasonably high. But it is a product. We'll have to continuously invest in the product and continuously invest in the market expansion.
Well, the third quarter of financial year 2019 for HPCL was not strong, but definitely ahead of the analyst estimates. Now, if you see, compared to last quarter, the revenues of the company were higher by nearly 7% to close to 72,000 crore rupees, while EBITDA came down by nearly 55% to close to 963 crore rupees. Margins came in at around 1.3%, while the net profit fell nearly 77% to close to 248 crore rupees. Now, the numbers were ahead of the analyst estimates on the back of higher sales number, a stronger gross refining margin, and because of forex gain that aided the third quarter of financial financial year 2019. Now, if you see the sales volume, they were higher by nearly 6.6% to close to 9.74 million metric tons, while the gross refining margin for HPCL came in at close to $3.72 per barrel. Now, analysts were estimating a negative gross refining margin, and this big beat coming in the gross on the gross refining margin helped the company report a good set of numbers compared to the analyst estimates. Now, if you see the inventory loss, that was huge for HPCL in the third quarter. The inventory losses of close to 3,500 crore rupees came in the third quarter versus an inventory gains of close to 1,276 crore rupees in the last quarter, while a foreign exchange gain of close to 597 crore rupees as against a loss of around 887 crore rupees in the last quarter also aided HPCL in the third quarter of financial year 2019. Now, if you see the crude throughput, that was down by nearly 4.2% to close to 4.56 million metric tons, while on the balance sheet side, if you see the company's debt, now that was higher by nearly 15% to close to 20,600 crore rupees. Lastly, on the segmental wise, if you see the performance, the refining performance was strong and ahead of the analyst estimates. It compared to last quarter, if you see, it increased by nearly 23% to close to 645 crore rupees on the back of stronger gross refining margin, while the marketing segment performance was weaker because of lower gross marketing margins earned by the oil marketing companies. And in the third quarter, if you see, compared to last quarter, it was down by nearly 86% to close to 105 crore rupees. Now, we also have two major pharma companies reporting its numbers today, and we have Darshan joining us to give us more details on the same.
Yeah, so it'll be muted for both of them, Soumit. Let's start with Cipla first. If you're looking at the top line growth of just 5% is something that we're seeing on a year-on-year basis. Profit obviously will be down 8%. EBITDA will be down close to 8%. Recent launches that the company did will aid the company as far as the top line growth is concerned. But overall, they've launched Toprol this time around. Elbenza is the other product that they launched. But nevertheless, there is pressure in the tender business, which may impact margins for the company. There is delayed in the onset of acute respiratory season, which may affect the India business. Obviously, there were issues as far as supply constraints over the past few quarters. That probably could also play an impact. Decline in Iran and Yemen sales may also continue because of the US sanctions. What do you watch out for? What's this US sales guidance that they're giving? When do they expect any kind of revival as far as the tender business is concerned? And the resolution of the recent business challenges, especially in terms of the supply chain, is something that we need to ask the management. Lupin obviously also will be very bad. If you're looking at the net sales, that will be up 3%. EBITDA will be down 7%. Profit no doubt will be up 26% because of other income this time around, which we are expecting that will come in. Probably a one-off is also what we are expecting as a one-time. Top line will be muted on the back of erosion in prices, competition significantly in drug, lack of new launches that happened in the quarter. That will dent the top line of the company. US sales, we are expecting a growth of anywhere between 7 to 8% quarter on quarter. Tamiflu season will be weak. Metformin volumes will aid the sequential growth. Expect India to grow to be close to 10% this time around. What do you watch out for? Update on the warning letter resolution, and what's the FY19 US sales guidance? That's something that we need to watch out and ask the management once they come out with their numbers. But JSW Steel will report numbers. Nikki, what are we expecting?
We're expecting good set of numbers year on a year basis, but then sequentially we might just see a dip coming in on account of the steel prices, which have been contracting sequentially. However, iron ore prices and the coking coal, the key essential raw material, too have been on uptrend, which in turn may partially offset the gains that we've seen on the EBITDA performance of the company. On the face of it, the numbers, revenue 18% uptick that we're expecting. EBITDA is a 14% growth out there. Margins are expected to remain flattish around that 21-22% kind of level. Profitability is also expected to remain flattish on account of the interest cost that the company might face, which will in turn weigh down on the bottom line performance of the company. Volume figure and consolidated figure. Now that's a key metric that we like to keep an eye out on the JSW Steel companies besides spreads. That number is expected to be around that 4 MT. It's a muted trend seen year-on-year basis. EBITDA per ton too is seen around that 11,000 per ton level, which is a 15% uptick year-on-year basis, but then sequentially it's a downtick of 12%. Realization are expected to be down around at that 52,000-53,000 kind of a level, down by as much as 5% sequentially. But then apart from the key matrix, we'd also like to keep an eye out on essentially the steel price commentary, if any, coming from the management, given that the cost input pressures right now, coking coal sits at a good 2-year year high level. Iron ore prices are at 2-year high level on global front. So apart from that, these are the two things that we like to keep an eye out on JSW Steel.
The finance minister has announced 500 crore rupees during the budget towards pension of workers in the unorganized sector. So here we are at Dharavi, which is the small scale industries hub of Mumbai, to understand from the workers in the informal sector whether they expect the money to reach them and what are the benefits of pension that they have got so far. पेंशन आपको क्या कहते हैं, जो ये अनाउंसमेंट हुआ था इसके बारे में मालूम पड़ा?
अगर नहीं अपने को मालूम नहीं चला, अगर मालूम चला तो अच्छी बात है। अगर ये अपने सरकार ने अपने लिए किया है तो अच्छा है गरीब लोग के लिए, तो इस हिसाब से अपने को फ़ायदा होगा तो अपना सपोर्ट भी अपने देंगे।
स्कीम तो रोज़ पेपर में पढ़ता हूँ कि आए दिन कोई बजट पास हो रहा है कोई, लेकिन उसका कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है, क्योंकि वो चीज़ हमें पता ही नहीं कि वो चीज़ कहाँ से हमें उसका फ़ायदा मिलेगा।
हर महीने थोड़े थोड़े पैसे जमा करने को तैयार है?
हाँ तैयार है, कर सकते।
तो सरकार की जो अभी तक की पेंशन योजनाएं थी उसका लाभ क्यों नहीं उठा पाए?
देगा जब ना उड़ाएंगे, बगैर दिए हुए कहाँ से उड़ाएंगे, उसकी जेब से थोड़ी निकाल सकते।
ये जो 500 करोड़ की बात की है सरकार ने, कितनी उम्मीद है कि ये पैसे आप तक आएंगे?
कोई भरोसा नहीं इसका, ये तो सबसे बड़े चोर लोग सरकारी लोग हैं, वही रख लेंगे, हमको क्या देंगे।
पेंशन की जो ये अनाउंसमेंट हुआ है 500 करोड़ का, उसके बारे में आपको लगता है कि आपको पैसे
नहीं मिलेंगे? पैसे सब सरकार लोग खा जाएंगे, हमको कहाँ मिलेगा?
सरकार की योजना का कभी लाभ उठाने का कोशिश किया कि मैं जाऊं कहीं फॉर्म का पता करूं?
अरे करने तो बहुत किया होगा, कुछ नहीं हुआ।
क्या कुछ बताओ, कैसे कब किया था?
पेपर में लिख के आता है जॉब लेने के लिए, मगर वो मिलता थोड़ी ना है।
तो लगता है पेंशन अगर आपको मिले 60 की उम्र के बाद तो थोड़ी तकलीफ कम होगी?
मिलेगा तो और अच्छी बात रहेगा, अब नहीं मिल रहा तो मैडम क्या कर सकते हैं।
अच्छा, उसके लिए आपको भी हर महीना पैसा देना पड़ेगा, कुछ 40 रुपये 50 रुपये, तो वो आप दोगे?
हाँ चलेगा मैडम, दे सकते हैं हम लोग दे सकते हैं, मिलेगा तो दे सकते हैं। मिलने का उम्मीद रहेगा बाद में, हैं ऐसा बोल रहे 60 साल के बाद में मिलेगा, वो तो मिलेगा पैसा 40-50 का भरने तो बोल रहे हैं, भरना पड़ेगा तो मिलेगा पैसा, भर देंगे। भरने में क्या है, अपने लोग है टाइम, अब ज़्यादा दिन बचा थोड़ी ना है, ये सब हालत में काम कर रहे, कोई ज़िंदगी बची नहीं है, जो है वही है। जो डाल देंगे वो भी चले जाएगा मैडम, जो डालते हैं वो वापस काम मिलता है, वो भी चले जाता है।
अभी ये आया था ना गरीबी रेखा का, उसका भरा, और योगी जो पास किया था बीमा का, उसका फॉर्म भरा गया, अभी तक वो फॉर्म अटका है, कहीं का कुछ नहीं आया।
पेंशन का कभी फॉर्म भरा?
नहीं, पेंशन का भी नहीं फॉर्म भरा।
और पेंशन
कहाँ से मिलेगा? जब उनके पास पैसे होएगा तो पेंशन देगा ना, पेंशन तो खाली जेब में बटोरना है उनको।
कभी अप्लाई नहीं किया किसी योजना?
कुछ नहीं करे हम, अब कुछ करे नहीं तो क्या बताऊँ, जब अपने खर्चा में से बचेगा पैसा तभी तो इंसान कुछ भी कर सकता है।
अगर आपको 40 रुपये या 50 रुपये तक अलग करने हों ताकि आप सरकार का ये पेंशन 60 की उम्र के बाद ले सके, तो आप ऐसा 40 रुपये अलग रखना चाहोगे, नहीं रखना चाहोगे?
नहीं, खर्चे नहीं पूरा होता ना तो कैसे कर रखेंगे।
आप मुझे बताइए, आप लोग क्या काम करते हैं, कहाँ पे काम करते हैं?
बिल्डिंग में, मतलब खाना बनाने जाते हैं हम लोग।
अच्छा, और आप?
वही खाना बनाने का ही।
कितनी सैलरी मिलती है आपको?
1500, 2000, 3000 तक है।
आपको?
वही 3000 तक ही हम।
तो सरकार ने बोला अगर आप महीने का कुछ 40-50 रुपए अलग करके पेंशन फंड में डालोगे तो 60 साल की उम्र के बाद आपको 3000 महीना मिलेगा। तो ऐसी किसी स्कीम का, पेंशन की स्कीम का पहले फ़ायदा उठा पाए, या अब ये स्कीम आई है तो उसका फ़ायदा उठा पाएंगे या उठाएंगे?
उसका तो कुछ नहीं बोल सकते।
कभी फॉर्म भी भरते हो?
नहीं,
कुछ नहीं, फॉर्म भी कुछ नहीं भरा है हम लोग।
सरकार की कई सारी योजनाएं आती हैं, उनका कब
है वगैरह, लेकिन हम लोग वो सब नहीं किया है।
क्यों फ़ायदा नहीं उठा पाते?
हम लोग छोटा मोटा काम करते हैं, वैसे कि बच्चों लोग का ट्यूशन फिशन, उसमें घर में हम लोग का एडजस्ट हो जाता है पैसा।
Even though the government announced a pension scheme for unorganized workers, which it feels would become the largest in the world in the next 5 years, the people in Dharavi were either not aware of it or didn't trust the government enough to release the funds. And these continue to remain the biggest shortcomings of the schemes announced by the government.
Well, a bunch of news that you're tracking this morning. I'm going to start off with IDFC First Bank results. Typically, if you look at the numbers, net loss of 1,538 crore for the bank as compared to the profitability. Now, remember, this is after the merger of Capital First and its two arm with the IDFC Bank, which has been given effect in the results. So, might as well not be comparable on year-on-year basis. GNPA, it's a 1.97% figure out there as compared to 1.63%. Sequentially, we're looking at deteriorating financials out there. Dish TV Q3 consolidated basis, look at the top line growth, not good set of numbers again. We're looking at a downtick coming in on the top line front for the company, a 6% downtick there. The company has reported a net profit as compared to a net loss, but then the EBITDA remains to be flattish. That's mainly on account of the deferred tax credit reversal, which in turn is aiding the bottom line performance of the company. Soba, where the company has actually reported a good set of numbers above estimates. Top line, we're looking at a 14% growth out there. EBITDA also has been good enough, a decent growth coming in at 16%, which is percolated well down on the bottom line performance of the company. The company has also reported another income of nearly 10 crore in the current quarter. DLF, however, look at the net profit there. Operationally also, it's not good set of number. Top line, we've registered a 31% growth out there, but clearly the expenses have weighed down on the operational front. EBITDA down by 8.7% for the company. Margin has contracted to a good 29% as compared to 40% seen in the corresponding quarter, looking at an exceptional gain of around 8,569 crore, because of which the company has actually managed to report in profits out there. V-Mart Retail, where the revenues have shown a 26% uptick. EBITDA performance of the company too has been healthy at 14.5%, and margins somehow have contracted, however, to 15% as compared to 17%. A mixed bag out there. Bharti Airtel, doubt if the clarification would salvage the situation for the company. It clarifies that the overall debt situation is already comfortable. Plan initiative will further benefit the debt picture, and the board has formed a fundraising committee to undertake a meeting on Feb 28th. Axis and Syndicate Bank, where RBI has imposed a penalty on both of these banks, 20 lakhs on Axis Bank for contravention of regulations related to detection of counterfeit notes, and for Syndicate Bank, this relates to the non-compliance with regulation related to fraud classification and risk management. Future enterprises might see some bearing coming in, given that the company has deferred in fundraising plans, and PVR, which has now terminated an MOU signed with El Fatem, which has been signed initially for exploring joint developed cinema businesses in Middle East. The management says it's no longer interested in deploying any capital for that region. Back to you guys.
On to space then. India launched its 40th communication satellite by European launch services provider Ariane space rocket from French Guiana in early hours today. The satellite was injected in the orbit in a flight that lasted about 42 minutes, and the GSAT-31 satellite will be used for supporting VSAT networks, television uplinks, digital satellite news gathering, DTH television services, cellular backhaul connectivity, and many such applications. The Ariane 5 vehicle also carried Saudi Arabia's geostationary satellite. And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of All You Need to Know. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for more news and updates.